everyone. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh Hewitt today, live from the ReliefFactor.com studios here in Central Texas on Salem Radio as well as Salem News Channel. And let me tell you, we actually had planned for this hour, but then war broke out. I don't know if you've heard about this, but war broke out. War broke out between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And I mean, when we say shots fired, not quite literally, but about as sharp as it's going to get between two social media platform owners. Elon Musk is on Twitter taking shots at Trump. Trump is in the White House taking shots at Elon Musk. And the rest of us are somewhere in between here going, we either knew that this was going to happen eventually, or why did this have to happen at all? We're seeing a bunch of reactions to this. A lot of people are saying maybe both people should get over themselves and get back to doing good things for the American taxpayer, which both men were doing and probably still will be doing down the road. And the question is how serious is this going to be? Right now, you got Elon Musk calling Donald Trump a liar. You've got Donald Trump saying lots of different things about Elon Musk. We should just go right to the cuts on this one. Donald Trump was in the Oval Office today, which, Elon Musk was just there, I think, at the end of last week, being thanked profusely by Donald Trump for the work that he did, the sacrifices that he did. They are falling out, though, pretty hard over the big, beautiful bill. Elon Musk wanted a lot more cuts to spending. He feels like he's being betrayed. Donald Trump is saying it's as good as it's going to get, and we're going to do some of these things down the road. It's a position that my colleague David Strom at Hot Air, I think, elucidated pretty well yesterday in a late evening post. But that is not enough, apparently, to keep the war from breaking out into the open. Let's go to cut number 12, where Donald Trump was speaking with the Chancellor of Germany, and the subject turned to Elon Musk.
He's upset. Remember, he was here for a long time. You saw a man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval desk, and even with the black eye, I said, do you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup. But he said, no, I don't think so, which is interesting. And very nice. He wants to be who he is, so you could make that statement too, I guess. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer. Said the best things. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill because that's what it is. And again, biggest tax cuts in history, biggest economic development moves anywhere. We've never done anything like it. He's upset. Remember,
so this is part one. We got another cut here too, and again, recall that this is actually a Oval Office spray. Now, Donald Trump loves to turn these into press conferences, which is a little unusual for the White House. Usually the press spray is really just there for the pictures when you have these meetings, and they generally then would hold a separate press conference with the head of state or head of government that is visiting at the time. And Donald Trump likes to combine these two, and he likes to engage with the press. And so that was, Elon Musk was not the topic at hand. It was our relationship with the EU and with Germany specifically. But Donald Trump didn't just let it go at that. Let's go to cut number 13, where he starts talking about why he thinks Elon Musk is so angry with him.
Elon's upset because we took the EV mandate, and which was a lot of money for electric vehicles, and they're having a hard time, the electric vehicles, and they want us to pay billions of dollars in subsidy. And Elon knew this from the beginning. He knew it for a long time ago. That's been in there. That's been, I would say, JD, that hasn't changed. That's been right from the beginning. Mr. Secretary, that hasn't changed at all, right from the beginning. But I know that disturbed him. He wanted, and rightfully, he recommended somebody from that he, I guess, knew very well. I'm sure he respected him, but to run NASA, and I didn't think it was appropriate. And he happened to be a Democrat, like totally Democrat. And I say, look, we won. We get certain privileges, and one of the privileges we don't have to appoint a Democrat. NASA is very important. We have great people. General Kane is going to be picking somebody with our. We'll be checking him out, seeing. But he wanted that person, a certain person, and we said no. And I can understand why he's upset.
Well, Elon Musk isn't just letting this go. He's on Twitter a lot. One of the things that he says, and this was just, I think, about 45 minutes ago, he says, "Oh, and some food for thought as they ponder this question. Trump has 3.5 years left as president, but I will be around for 40 plus years." So apparently Elon Musk thinks he's playing the long game in this war. Honestly, I don't think anybody really signed up for this, and I think that this is not going to reflect well on either person. Donald Trump apparently had some extended thoughts on Truth Social, where he's talking about he wants to save money by canceling some government contracts that involve Elon Musk. Presumably, this would mean SpaceX, which is basically keeping America in the space game, and there's no way around this. The NASA project with Boeing is not going anywhere. That was the project that stranded 2 astronauts, and Elon Musk months later had to rescue them from the International Space Station. It's the only really reliable delivery service that the United States has at the moment to get astronauts into space so that they can complete their missions, and it's the only one that's looking forward to moon landings and then Mars landings, which is, of course, what Musk is all about. And at the same time, they're really more closely aligned than they are apart. The issue about the Doge cuts, and this is the thing that I think is frustrating for so many of us. The issue with the Doge cuts isn't that Republicans don't want to cut spending. They do, but you have to do it in a certain way. It's very technical, and this is what gets people very, very frustrated. I would love to have seen more cuts in the reconciliation bill, but reconciliation has to clear certain hurdles in order to qualify for reconciliation. Otherwise, it's just a budget bill and it's subject to the filibuster. And one of those hurdles is deficit neutrality. Right now, they're being hung up on a CBO score that is going to, if it's not corrected, is going to hang this bill up. And the problem with what they want to do is they want to cut money now and money in the future. But the only way that you can cut money in a budget that has already been passed is to send a rescission request to Congress, which the White House did this week. But it was only $9 billion. And according to Musk, he's identified $1.5 trillion of spending that should be eliminated. So this is a very minimal first rescission package. There may be more than one. They may send a series of these to Congress. But that's how you stop currently appropriated money. And then after the reconciliation bill passes, then you go into the appropriations process for the next budget cycle, where hopefully we'll see some cuts. But that's where you'd have to make it for future budgets. So the focus on the reconciliation bill, I get it. It's a constrained vehicle for pushing these things through. And I think in this particular case, Donald Trump is famously impatient, let us say, with the processes of government. But in this case, I think he's seeing that there's only so much that you can do with this particular vehicle, and the rest of it is going to have to wait. And he's promising that they're going to be working at it harder and harder in the appropriations process, which is what should be coming up now in July, August, and September. And I don't know if Elon Musk is just simply not cognizant of this, doesn't care about it, wants to see the cuts. He may be picking up on certain members in Congress like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, who are saying these things are possible now and we should have held out for them. We'll see. But I have a sneaking suspicion that in the end, these two guys are going to come back together again. If maybe we should employ some matchmakers, right? Maybe this isn't even a war. Maybe this is a spat between two spouses, and we just need to get these two kids back together again, just the way that they were in love, a few months ago. Whatever it is, we're going to keep an eye on the war. Coming up next, we're going to have John Ashbrook from the Ruthless podcast talking about this, also talking about Karine Jean-Pierre's new literary career. Well, we may still talk with John Ashbrook, but I do have to note that another battle has been fought in the Musk-Trump war. This one is more along the lines of the clip from Animal House. It's over, man. Dean Wormer just dropped the big one. Elon Musk just tweeted out about 10 minutes ago, I guess, Time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. That is... I don't think there's any coming back from that. And look, I was chatting with my friend Adam Baldwin, my friend, your friend, everybody's friend, Adam Baldwin, and he is positing the idea, and this idea had occurred to me, and it's actually a pretty, it's a credible theory, right? Which is that the idea behind Doge was that Elon Musk was going to start it off, he was going to get it going, he was going to make sure it was on the right footing. Then he was going to find a way to sort of bail out in a way that would allow him to distance himself from Donald Trump so it wouldn't impact his businesses in the long run. And that this falling out was more or less a planned scenario so that Musk could get some distance from Trump and recover any damage to his business interests. I have been seeing that same thing. Some friends of mine have said the same thing. Look, these guys are, Donald Trump's a big fan of wrestling, right? This is kayfabe. And it might be. It still might be. I would feel a little bit more comfortable if it was. But I don't think that having Elon Musk supposedly reveal that Donald Trump was in the Epstein files would have been part of that kayfabe. That seems to me to be just a little too much of a nuclear blast than that. And we do now have John Ashbrook. He's a White House correspondent and the host of the Ruthless podcast. And we've got to talk to John about this. John, welcome to the show. I think maybe we may not have John. We may not have John yet. Okay, so but at any rate, this is something that is probably not kayfabe. I would imagine is not kayfabe, but it would be hilarious if it turned out to be kayfabe. I'm just saying that. Another friend of mine, Olivier Knox, said, "My God, you could drop a news dump the size of, actually, yes, we found dead alien bodies in their ship at Area 51 right now, and nobody would notice." You could also talk about, I don't know, the trade talks between China and the U.S. We'll talk about that a little bit, maybe. We could also talk a little bit about what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, Donald Trump. We might get to that, too, because we've got lots of cuts on that. But honestly, this is sort of like one of those traffic accidents that you just can't take your eyes off of. This is not a great day, I think, for the Trump-Musk effort to reduce government spending. I think this might be over. So now, of course, all the reporters on Capitol Hill are rushing around trying to get Republicans to comment on this. Mike Johnson, who is apparently normally chatty, according to Jake Sherman of Punchbowl, does not want to talk to any reporters at the moment. I am not sure that I could blame him. This does look like it's going to get pretty ugly, and there's a lot of room for it to get ugly. And I think that there was already some questions about, this is kind of a punch that will stick, because there was already a lot of questions as to why Pam Bondi, Kash Patel were promising to release the entirety of the Epstein files, and then clearly is holding back some of these. I believe Tom Fitton, his Judiciary Watch, has sued the Department of Justice now to get those released under a FOIA Act, since the Department of Justice is now pretty clearly saying that they exist. And there aren't any outstanding prosecutions. The only thing on the Epstein files, just to extend the thoughts a little bit, is I believe Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal to the Supreme Court has not been concluded. I think that's this term. And we're going to get to some SCOTUS stuff in a little bit. In this hour, we're going to be talking with Cam Edwards from BearingArms.com about a very good Supreme Court decision that came down today. It was a unanimous decision, as I believe all 5 that came down today were unanimous decisions, that is protecting American gun manufacturers from lawsuits from foreign countries. And we'll talk to Cam a little bit about that. But if if we're hoping for some sort of rapprochement between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, I got to tell you, I don't think it's happening. I really don't think it's happening. And I'm not even sure where you go from here on this topic. The different things that Elon Musk has been involved in this administration, how they have been partnering together on this, and the other thing that you could take from this, though, and this is again some more three-dimensional chess, and again, my friend Adam Baldwin is the one who's suggesting this, is that, look, this is going to force them to release the Epstein files in their entirety. So maybe this is a little bit of a kayfabe in that sense too. Possibly could be. But for right now, I'm imagining that the White House is sort of scrambling as to how you respond to that, and they should be scrambling on this. I mean, it's a pretty rocky day that's going on right now, but perhaps this will uncork the Epstein files. Perhaps this will uncork full disclosure of that, and we shall see. But in the meantime, I'm not sure if we're going to get a chance to talk to John Ashbrook at the moment, but let's talk a little bit about the American Legislative Exchange Council. American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, is proud to announce the launch of the Process and Procedures Task Force, a new initiative promoting clear rules of engagement between government and its citizens. This is the second new ALEC task force launched this year, marking a period of continued growth for the largest nonpartisan voluntary membership organization of state legislators. ALEC members are demanding leadership, real solutions, and a principled federalist framework to restore voter trust and safeguard the electoral process. The Process and Procedures Task Force will hold their inaugural meeting at the 52nd ALEC annual meeting, which takes place at July 16th through 18th in Indianapolis, Indiana. To learn more about what's happening in your state and others, watch Federalism in Action, sign up for ALEC's free weekly newsletter at alec.org/Hugh. That's ALEC.org/Hugh. And I think, to some extent, to the extent that this is on the level, the conflict here between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, I think it does speak to trust in government. It speaks to the lack of trust in government. We're going to be talking a lot about that this hour, especially in regards to Karine Jean-Pierre, Joe Biden, and Supreme Court. Let's go right to John Ashbrook, ruthless podcaster, White House correspondent. John, should I call you a war correspondent? What's going on with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, man?
Oh, man. You know better than me. It just seems to be spinning up and up and up all afternoon. I don't know if you saw the latest tweet, but Elon is now attacking him about the Epstein files. So it just doesn't seem like Elon is standing down anytime soon.
I was willing to believe it was kayfabe, right? That this is sort of like a little bit of something that they kind of cooked up just for a little exit strategy for Musk. But I mean, that's a nuclear bomb, man. You don't drop Epstein on a conversation like that.
Nuclear bomb on the most powerful man on the planet. I mean, you have the richest guy fighting the most powerful guy, and I gotta be honest with you. I think Trump has the advantage here because Trump is much better at publicity than anybody else who's ever walked the face of the earth. And I know Elon owns Twitter and he's super rich and everything, but I wouldn't count Trump out. That guy is super, super smart.
Yeah, the other thing that Trump likes to do is sue people for defamation. So if this isn't kayfabe, good luck, Elon.
Look out.
Look out. Hire, buy a couple more law firms. You might need it. All right. I wanted. We only have a couple of minutes because I know that we had some technical difficulties, and John's been such a champ here in staying with us. The Karine Jean-Pierre thing. We're going to get to that a little bit later in the show. But I mean, what do you make of Karine Jean-Pierre and this idea that she's going to write a book that tells people to go independent because Democrats stink? I mean,
I'll tell you.
Seriously?
I'll tell you what, Ed. The biggest downside of Biden leaving office is losing the content that came every single day with Karine Jean-Pierre stepping to the podium. And we thought we would never, ever get a chance to see or hear from her again. Well, turns out we were wrong. She came back in stupendous fashion. I mean, she is rolling out this book, and I just can't even believe it. You've probably seen how some of the people who worked with her in the White House are now coming out and dumping on what she actually was like behind the scenes. They're like, no, you thought she was dumb up there on stage. She was actually much dumber than you ever thought. So I can never get enough of it. And one of the things that's most interesting to me about the situation with her is that, Ed, there's an old saying in politics that the easiest job in the industry is Democrat press secretary. So everybody wonders, how can somebody like her be so bad at a job that's so easy? But I think that the ease of which Democrats get easy press and fawning coverage from all the broadcast networks and all the major dailies, I think that makes them soft and it makes them bad at their jobs. And so they're a victim of their own circumstances.
You know, John, I mean, and I think you're bringing up a great point here. I didn't think Jen Psaki was very good at her job, and then she made Jen Psaki, you know, Corinne Jean-Pierre made Jen Psaki look like Tony Snow. I mean, she was that bad. And and I'm wondering why go this route? I just don't understand where she thinks this is going to happen, because the book isn't actually going to blow the lid off of the cover-up. She's going to argue in this book, according to the publisher, that the reason why Democrats lost the election is because they didn't stay loyal to Biden.
Yeah, I think there's some people who get into politics because they want to make a difference, and there's some people who get into politics because they want to become famous. And I think it's pretty obvious that she's in this line of work because she thought it was her ticket to stardom. And it's just a different kind of stardom that she's receiving. I mean, I don't know if you've seen all the Twitter activity over the last 2 days about her with this book launch, but everybody left, right, and center is coming out of the woodwork to just dunk on this woman. And I think she's kind of earned it. You know, I mean, she was terrible to the press. She kicked out over 400 people from that briefing room simply because they had the temerity to ask questions that she didn't want to be asked. And she's had it easy, and like nobody needs to hear her talk about how she's going to find the solution for an independent, more loving and friendly America. Nobody believed her then, nobody believes her now, but it is very funny to watch it all play out.
Well, and we've only got maybe 30 seconds left, John. But I mean, she was the chief propagandist in this thing. She was basically a Baghdad Bob of the Biden administration. Do you ever get past that? Will anybody ever let her forget that?
I don't think so. I think Democrats did horrible damage to their brand. Obviously, Biden did horrible damage to his, and she is right there in the middle of those two. I don't think she ever recovers from it. I mean, because the number of times she stood up there and said, no, I swear to you, he's super smart. He's super on top of it behind the scenes. How can you ask these questions? That won't go away.
I don't think so either. John Ashbrook, man, thank you so much. Thank you for hanging in there with us. I know that I would love to have talked to you some more, but we got to let you go. I'm going to talk a few other things that happened today at the Oval Office. I want to talk a little bit about economics, because we're probably not going to get a chance to get to this a little bit later on. There's been some interesting economic reports that are coming out. We do have some cuts on this. And one of the things that we are looking at are the trade deficit. There's been some numbers on trade deficits come in of late. And looking at projected GDP for the second quarter. Now, for those who don't recall this, GDP actually came in slightly negative in the first quarter, 0.3 to the negative, minus 0.3 annualized, right? So it's very, very, very slightly negative. And it was only negative because there was a huge flood of imports in the first quarter. It was a 41% quarter-on-quarter increase in imports. And the reason why is because everybody was trying to import the goods before the tariffs were going to be applied. Everybody knew that they were coming, and they literally came the second day of the next quarter. So they rushed to get all of the goods into the country first, and now they're working off a very large inventory. And that matters for a couple of reasons, which we're going to talk about. But primarily it matters in the first quarter because imports count against GDP. So the more you import, the lower your GDP becomes because it's not being produced here. And so in the first quarter, that 41% quarter-on-quarter increase in imports, the largest in at least years, probably the largest ever, took at least 4 points off the GDP and possibly as many as 5. And that's not just me talking, that's the actual GDP report from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. It's actually a notation in that Q1 GDP report. Now that's the initial report, because we're still going to get we still have two more reports. The advanced report, I should say. Then there's the interim report, and then there's the final report. We haven't seen the interim or final reports, but we should be seeing those pretty quickly. But that was the calculation. The reason why that matters is because we are starting to see the swing back on the trade deficit type of things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because Donald Trump was talking about that. Again, in the same Oval Office gaggle that was going on with the German Chancellor, he was talking about some of the economic numbers. And let's go to cut number 7 first, where he's talking about them more generally. Donald Trump, again, speaking to the White House today about the economy.
You know, it's good timing. The numbers for our country are through the roof, the economic numbers, because of the election and because of tariffs and other things, a lot of things. But we've had some of the best numbers we've ever had. They were reported yesterday, the day before, and even today. The country's doing really well. I think that one of the things you'd be most interested in is that 6 months ago, we were having a hard time getting anybody to join our military. I mean, they just couldn't do it. The numbers were record low. We couldn't get people to join the military. It wasn't me. This is before I got there, the past administration. But 6 months ago, a year ago, the numbers were record low. You couldn't get them to join. That included the police. And you couldn't get them to join. Now, we just hit the highest number in the history of our country, we think, but very close, but the highest in the history of our country, recruitment, joining the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, police forces all over the country.
What did you do for that? What was the reason?
Spirit. They love our country again. You know? You're going to do the same thing. Spirit. We have great spirit is back in our country, and it's very simple. You know, it was only, Susie, 6 months ago, right, that you got reports, you're the one that released them, that you couldn't get anybody to join the military, and now we're stocked. Every service now is packed, and we have waiting lists of people trying to get in, as good as we've ever had in the history of our country. So that's an honor. That's a great honor.
Yeah. So obviously he was talking generally about the economy, and he starts talking about military recruitment. Also great numbers, by the way, military recruitment numbers. Let's very quickly go to Rick Santelli at CNBC, who's making a point about the trade deficit number. And this is where I think we need to temper some expectations. Cut number 14.
On the trade balance, and do remember, last week's advance only included goods. This one includes goods and services, comes in at minus 61.6 billion. That's about 5 billion less than we were expecting in terms of the deficit, but it does follow a revised 138 billion with a minus sign that was 140 billion, and that, of course, was an all-time record trade balance of goods and services. And as you can see, it has now been cut by more than half, and the big drop in imports seems to be where everyone's pointing. The big news there is how much it bolsters GDP. Just look at Atlanta Fed GDP now, which is at 4.64%.
Okay, and that's true. However, you've got to remember that we imported most of the goods that we would normally import in the second quarter in the first quarter, and maybe even some of the goods that we would normally import in the third quarter, in the first quarter. And so, yes, that trade imbalance is there because we've already sort of gotten a hit up front. And so it's not that the economy is bad. The economy is good. The economy was good in the first quarter. It's going to be good in the second quarter. But when you're looking at these trade deficit numbers, they look good right now because everybody was doing their importing in January, February, and to some extent in March. And that's the reason why goods, especially goods just, they didn't import as many goods because they've already got large inventories of them that they're going to be working off of for the next several months. So yes, and the Atlanta Fed is saying, look, we're estimating Q2 GDP to come in at 4.6%. My guess is that if you'd had an even amount of imports over Q1 and Q2, probably both quarters would have come in around 3.5%. Because the economy's good. The basic economy is good. The fundamentals of it are good. But you have to be careful when you're looking at these numbers, especially in the trade deficit, based on just the anomalous number that came out of Q1. And so, yes, in April, no doubt that we cut way back on imports, and I warned people that we would. because simply they don't need to import anything. Their inventories are already full. They're going to be working off of those inventories for a while, those inflated inventories. So just be aware of what that means. You're still going to see a good, strong Q2 number, I think, and the Atlanta Fed's right about that. But part of that is being tweaked a bit by what happened in Q1. Just one quick thought here before we move on to other things today. Somebody sent me a little note that said, hey, look, the Epstein files have been floating around within the federal government for the last 6 years, 8 years. If Donald Trump's name was on it, we would have been seeing this in October of last year and maybe October of 2016 too. So my guess is that Elon Musk is just looking for ways to tweak his former friend, I guess. I don't know. But now it's time to talk a little bit about Angel Tree Camp. We just want to do a quick reminder about Hugh's annual Angel Tree Camp drive. Thanks to men and women just like you, so far this month we've been blessed with over 190. We've blessed over 190 children with a mom or a dad in prison with a trip to Angel Tree Camp for an entire week. This has the potential to literally transform these kids' lives and break the cycle of crime in their family. You could be the person who sponsors our next deserving boy or girl who will be enjoying a week of fresh air, fun, and gospel-centered activities at an Angel Tree Camp near their home. We have a banner up at HughHewitt.com you can just click on to make a secure online donation. Steve Collins is a senior director of Angel Tree Camping, and he says when you make a gift to an Angel Tree kid, you're helping shape the future of America.
When you invest in the life of a child and you give them an opportunity to experience the reality of who God is and what his love does for their lives, and you pour that investment into that child's life, you're not just reaping benefits this year, but you're changing the course of their life. You've got kids that are growing up and establishing their own families and contributing to society, and you're shaping the future of our nation. And there's no better place to invest your money.
I want to invite you to join my many other listeners in transforming young lives. Your gift of $200 or whatever you can give will help make it possible to send a kid to camp for an entire week. So please just go to HughHewitt.com and click on the Make a Difference in the Lives of Prisoners' Children banner. Or you can phone in your most generous gift in any amount by calling 888-206-2764. That's 888-206-2764. And thank you for helping us send these wonderful children to Angel Tree Camp this summer. You'll be making a difference in a child's life for eternity. And it's a great thing. Now, coming up next, we're not going to have time to play the clip. But in the next hour, to start off the next hour, I'm very excited. We get a chance to talk to Scott Jennings of CNN, who I think is, along with Shermichael Singleton, Ellie Honig, and Harry Enton, the pollster analyst, Ellie Honig being their legal analyst, I think really just the only things that are really worth watching on CNN these days. And Scott Jennings is going to join us at the top of the hour to talk a little bit about Karine Jean-Pierre, some of the remarks he made yesterday. I want to run some of those by him and get a chance to see where he sees the end of this Biden cover-up going. We are going to be talking here, hopefully in a moment, with Scott Jennings of CNN. But just to set up our discussion with Scott, let's go to a cut that he had last night. And this is on Karine Jean-Pierre's new literary career, talking about how she's going to become an independent, or she has become an independent, and everybody else should, because Democrats are disloyal, I guess, to Joe Biden. Let's go to cut number 15, please.
I agree with you. I don't think she will, although I would argue that it's pretty disloyal to leave the political party that, gave you your biggest career shot that you've ever had. But I tend to agree with you. I mean, I think the things we've learned in the last 2 years is that the two least credible sources of information in this world are the Gaza Health Ministry and Karine Jean-Pierre. And when she puts this book out, every single person who reads it, reviews it, or discusses it needs to remember that virtually everything she said about what was going on behind the scenes in the White House was an outright lie. And so when she puts a book out, I think we ought to treat it from a source that has a proven track record of lying from the podium of the White House to the American people.
Well, we will find it.
I agree with you.
And that was Scott Jennings on CNN yesterday, and I believe we have Scott Jennings on our show right now. Scott, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm great, and it's great to see you and talk to you. I'm a big admirer of you and honored by the invitation.
Well, right back at you. I have told people that the only reason why CNN is relevant is because of Scott Jennings, Shermichael Singleton, and you guys are doing a great job on there. And look, I mean, I'm not going to ask you about the Elon Musk thing because I think the Corinne Jean-Pierre thing really needs to be explored, not just because of that book. Yeah, I know you appreciate that, but also because of the larger scandal around this. I mean, Corinne Jean-Pierre was a central part of the propaganda effort that defrauded the American public about Joe Biden's cognitive incapacity. And to come out with a book now that basically is apparently going to argue that the only thing wrong with Joe Biden is that the Democrat Party abandoned him, I mean, is sort of a jaw-dropping move, right?
Yeah, it's crazy actually, and that she's leaving the party that gave her the best career shot she ever had is kind of jaw-dropping. I mean, you have to remember who she was before she got this job. I mean, she was effectively a B-level, radical, progressive, apparatchik, in the MoveOn.org movement and all these, radical organizations. The Democratic Party and the mainstream sort of operatives in the Democratic Party are the only people who ever supported her. Now she's leaving them. She's leaving the party because they made obviously they made the only decision they could make, which was to finally admit that the President of the United States was too incapacitated to run for re-election. That's their fault. I mean, what she did at the podium was nothing short of an abomination. I suspect the Congress will drag her in for some kind of testimony at some point when they investigate this. But when she stood there in front of the reporters and called those videos cheap fakes, and anybody who was insinuating the president was anything other than well was a liar, she basically burned all of her capital at that moment. So I think if you buy this book in the fall, you got to know you're investing in a real grift here.
Well, caveat emptor. I mean, really, seriously, in this particular case, nobody's going to be forced to buy this book. And I suspect it's going to be remaindered before it hits any real bestseller lists anyway. The only people that are going to be looking to buy this book, I think, are people who are going to be looking up their names in the index in the back of it. And I don't think that that's going to sustain a whole lot of book sales.
Yeah.
However, I mean, I think that we all sort of expect a certain level of prevarication from the podium of a White House briefing room. I mean, ever since Tony Snow, I think we've just kind of decided, all right, these are people who are being brought in to basically spin what's going on inside the White House. But she was particularly bad at this because she was so deliberately hostile to people who asked real questions in that briefing room. It wasn't a question of, well, I'll get back to you. We'll circle back. It was Jen Psaki's thing, and we'll circle back to you. She was actively lying to people while deriding them publicly for asking the question. And I mean, I think that this was a step beyond what we normally expect from, press flacks.
Well, when you choose people for this job, typically somebody in the process says, well, are they any good at it? I mean, that's the first question you should ask. And no one ever stopped to ask after they checked all the identity politics boxes, is this person any good at it? And the truth is she was terrible at it. And now even the Democrats who work with her in the White House are saying, well, she was horrible at this. I mean, to call her briefings word salads is an insult to words and salads. And so it wasn't just the lying. It was that she was performatively horrific at this, and it probably hurt the president's ability to get his message out on any given day when his own spokesperson was, as you pointed out, hostile to the media and just basically bad at, as one person said, they said, she was bad at managing a team and formulating a message. Well, that's pretty much what you do as White House press secretary. You manage a team and you formulate and deliver a message, and she couldn't do either. So as I said on CNN last night, and as you played, the two least credible sources of information in the world are the Gaza Health Ministry and Corinne Jean-Pierre. And what's amazing is Joe Biden was taken in by both of them.
Ooh, nicely done. I like that. We're gonna clip that one. I can tell you that one. We'll clip that one for later use, Scott. Yeah. So, what do you make of the White House, her colleagues going to Politico anonymously to say some of these things? I mean, because they're not state secrets. It's certainly not anymore. They're not state secrets. Everybody involved in this was certainly willing to jolly this thing along for another 4 years if they got the opportunity. And now all of a sudden, she's going to come out with a book that supposedly talks about how disloyal the rest of the team was to Joe Biden. They're coming out and they're attacking her, but not going out on the record to do it. I'm sensing that there's a whole lot of cowardice that was part of the makeup of the Biden administration.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're doing it anonymously. I would go out in my own voice and just call it what it is. You know, a very mediocre person was in over their head. They were given a position that they were not capable of doing. They were left in that position well beyond the point when it was obvious that she couldn't do it. I mean, remember, the White House ended up layering her at one point with John Kirby, who did many of the press briefings when something important was actually happening regarding national security. But they couldn't put her out there to competently discuss actual serious issues. So there was obviously a discussion and a decision inside the White House that, well, we got to layer her with a guy who actually knows what he's doing. Kirby, I thought, in most cases, did an admirable job at the podium. He's a serious person. She's not a serious person. Now, I was on CNN yesterday with Sochi Hinojosa, who was the spokesperson at the Department of Justice, and she actually, on the record, had some things to say. What you've seen anonymously, Sochi said them on our air yesterday on CNN, and I thought that was smart and took some guts to do that. But I don't know why the rest of them just don't come out and say, this was a terrible hire, and the management lesson here is never hire someone you can't fire, because that's what we did. We hired someone that, because of the politics of the Democratic Party, we could never get rid of, and it hurt us every single day.
Well, it's not like that she was somehow, they even tried to marginalize her. She was actually given a second position in the White House as a senior policy advisor to Joe Biden in the last, I think, 3 months of his presidency, or possibly 4 months. I believe it was October of last year. So this is not someone who was is going to be a truth teller of what was really going on inside the White House. And of course, today Joe Biden issued a statement saying that I was fully in charge. I guess I should let you respond to that. I mean, what did you make of that statement from Joe Biden today?
Well, I mean, what did I make of the statement that his wife put out on his behalf? I mean, I suspected that's what they would say, but I don't think it should derail the congressional investigation. I mean, we have credible, if you're somebody, and I am, who believes that we ought to at least look at what journalists have to say about serious issues, then we have credible reporting right now that the President of the United States may not have been aware of decisions being made on his behalf. If I had a nickel for everybody who used the term the big lie on our air after the 2020 election, I'd be a rich man. And if I shared it with you, we'd both be rich. And now we have actual reporting that the real big lie was that the president was in full control. This is the actual constitutional crisis. It absolutely
Scott
deserves
Jennings of CNN, we're out of time. I could talk to you forever, man, but thank you so much for being with us. We're going to actually get to Selena a little later on today. We're going to take a look at some other issues that came out of today's press spray at the White House. And I think we'll go from the silly to the serious in this, because there was a sort of a silly moment here in Donald Trump's meeting with the German Chancellor. Let's just let this speak for itself. Let's go to cut number 11.
We're having June 6th tomorrow. This is D-Day anniversary, when the Americans once ended a war in Europe. And I think this is in your hand in specific, in ours.
That was not a pleasant day for you?
No, that was not a pleasant.
This was not a great
in
day.
the long run, Mr. President, this was the liberation of my country from Nazi dictatorship.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
And we know what we owe you, but this is the reason why I'm saying that America is again in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war. So,
well, I mean, I don't know that it's a great idea to bring up D-Day in the context of having, and Trump didn't bring it up, the German Chancellor brought it up, but it was a strange choice. And I understood what he was getting at. He was getting at the idea that they could try to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. That's what they're trying to do, and probably to some extent the war in Gaza as well. But yeah, I think I might have been a little off-put by that as well. And I would also agree with Mertz here, which is that in the end, June 6th actually turned out to be a good day for Germany, because it was the beginning of the end of the Nazi grip on their own country. Unfortunately, the Germans didn't really do anything to stop that. It was only in retrospect that they thought that that was a good day in history. But there's more to this here, and talking a little bit more about the issue between Ukraine and Russia. We're going to go to cut number 5 here in just a minute, and Donald Trump talks a little bit about that. And it seems like, he's talking about the fact that he'd really like to see them come to some sort of agreement, but maybe that's just in the cards. Let's go to cut number 5.
What do you say and believe, apparently, that there's no immediate peace?
What?
That there's no immediate peace, there will be no...
Well, I can't. I'd love to have immediate if I could.
But why?
If I could, but we don't have immediate, It's like, I'd love to have that. I'd like it to start. Right now, we would leave a room. If we knew the war could end, we'd say, forget about you guys, forget about trade, right?
Yeah.
We'd say, let's go settle it. There's some additional fighting that's going to go on. He attacked, and they attacked pretty harshly. They went deep into Russia. And he actually told me, I made it very clear. He said, we have no choice but to attack based on that, and it's probably not going to be pretty. I don't like it. I said, don't do it. You shouldn't do it. You should stop it. But again, there's a lot of...
And again, this is part of the issue for Donald Trump, of course, is that he thought that he could, and he said it on a number of occasions, that they could actually, when he came in, he could solve this war within 24 hours. That was the claim. And I get where he has been trying to go with this. He's been trying to take a completely different approach to it by trying to talk to Putin and trying to talk Putin down, if you will, by showing him some sympathy, engaging with him. That isn't working. It's not working. And that's the reason why he's saying, look, I think there's just going to be more fighting that's going on. It doesn't mean that they're not going to try. And of course, that's the primary reason why Merz is there today. Which is to reinforce the idea that NATO is going to have a Western, a unified Western approach to this. But the unified Western approach had been tried for 3 years, and it just simply wasn't going to do anything. This thing is a stalemate. It's a quagmire. Both sides are now just taking haymaker shots at each other in an attempt to sort of break the logjam, and the logjam is just simply not breaking. And I don't think either side really has the resources for a major breakthrough in this war. Not unless, of course, Putin goes nuclear, which is the part that Donald Trump really wants to stop from happening. It's going to take some horse trading, and I don't think it's going to be quick. And I think he's trying to get people ready for that. He also talked a little bit more about the phone call this morning, and this was reported in Chinese state media. First, it was reported there first. It was confirmed by the White House later that Donald Trump had contacted Xi Jinping, China's premier, to talk about the trade issues that were going on. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the context of that call. But first, let's hear what Donald Trump had to say. Cut number 9.
We had a very good talk, and we've straightened out any complexity. It's very complex stuff, and we straightened it out. The agreement was we're going to have Scott and Howard and Jameson will be going and meeting with their top people and continue it forward. But no, I think we have everything. I think we're in very good shape with China and the trade deal. We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points, having to do mostly with rare earth, magnets, and some other things.
So those reduced trade tariff rates, they remain in effect?
Yeah, we have the deal. I mean, we've had a deal. We announced the deal, and we'll be, I guess you could say, I wouldn't even say finalizing it up, Scott. I would say we have a deal, and we're going to just make sure that everybody understands what the deal is. Okay? We had a really good conversation. By the way, he invited me to China, and I invited him here. We both accepted. So I'll be going there with the First Lady at a certain point, and he'll be coming here, hopefully, with the First Lady of China.
So the way that this was reported initially by Chinese state media was that Trump called Xi. And this is important. In diplomatic terms, it means that Trump is the person who's trying to, is trying to get a deal going. It is a face-saving claim, and it's possibly true. But certainly they would play that up. But the Wall Street Journal later added some context, which was that over the last couple of days, two different senior ministers from China were publicly asking Donald Trump to make some sort of a gesture to Xi Jinping so that they could get the conversation going again. Plus, Xi Jinping is looking at some very difficult economic conditions right now, and he can't really afford to have a slowdown in his economy, and so it became necessary for him to try to figure out some way to resolve this. And one of the reasons why, by the way, that they had been reluctant to get on the phone with Donald Trump in the first place is because of the meeting that they had with Cyril Ramaphosa, who is, of course, the president of South Africa, and the way that Donald Trump humiliated Ramaphosa in the Oval Office over the issue of violence aimed at the Boer farmers, the white farmers in South Africa. And apparently that left an impression. I'm sure that was an impression that the White House intended to leave, which is that Donald Trump is going to make people dance when he wants to. I think they're getting pushed pretty close to the point now where China's going to have to dance a little bit. And I think they understand that they're going to have to dance a little bit. Trump's going to have to dance a little bit too, because it's too important to the economy to at least dial down the conflict, the trade conflict that's going on here. Of course, whether or not he can dial down the conflict with Elon Musk is something completely different, but we already talked about that. We might talk about it a little later on in the next hour as well. This could be the theme song for the Donald Trump-Elon Musk war, right? Don't rock the boat. Don't rock the boat, baby. This could be it right here. We should make a special note of that. We should play that as a bed under every battle report that's coming from the Elon Musk Donald Trump war. We're going to step away from that for just a moment, though, to give you a quick reminder about Hugh's annual Angel Tree Camp Drive. Thanks to men and women just like you so far this month, we've blessed over 190 children with a mom or dad in prison with a trip to Angel Tree Camp for an entire week. This has the potential to literally transform these kids' lives and break the cycle of crime in their family. You could be just the person who sponsors our next deserving boy or girl who would be enjoying a week of fresh air, fun, and gospel-centered activities at Angel Tree Camp near their home. We have a banner up at hughhewitt.com. You can just click on it to make a secure online donation. Steve Collins is a senior director of Angel Tree Camping, and he says when you make a gift to an Angel Tree kid, you're helping shape the future of America.
When you invest in the life of a child and you give them an opportunity to experience the reality of who God is and what his love does for their lives, and you pour that investment into that child's life, you're not just reaping benefits this year, but you're changing the course of their life. You've got kids that are growing up and establishing their own families and contributing to society, and you're shaping the future of our nation. And there's no better place to invest your money.
I want to invite you to join Hugh's many other listeners in transforming young lives. Your gift of $200, or whatever you can give, will help make it possible to send a kid to camp for an entire week. So please, just go to hughhewitt.com and click on the Make a Difference in the Lives of Prisoners' Children banner, or you can phone in your most generous gift in any amount by calling 888-206-2764. That's 888-206-2764. And thank you for helping us send these wonderful children to Angel Tree Camp this summer. You'll be making a difference in a child's life for eternity. And I want to just say a word about the sponsor that was just mentioned, because it's one of my favorite sponsors here. It's besthotgrill.com. And I have friends at besthotgrill.com. It's awesome. I have had a Solaire infrared grill for 15 years. I believe it's 15 years. It's been at least, let me think about this now. It's been at least 11 years. The thing works great. It's awesome. It's the last grill you'll ever need. Lots of special events coming up this summer. I gotta get that thing cleaned up because the summer is here. And besthotgrill.com recommends the gifts of good grilling and healthy eating. If you have a mom, a dad, or a grad you want to honor, just do it with a gift that will be used, be unforgettable, and truly hot. That would be a Solaire infrared grill from besthotgrill.com. Solaire infrared grills heat up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. It produces juicy, tasty food that is unmatched by any conventional grill. Maybe you're hitting the road or having a staycation. Solaire has a hot, fast, portable, built-in, and cart models to help you set up your grilling. All Solaire infrared grills are made in the USA and built to last. Solaire grills deliver the wow that everybody likes to get in a gift or major purchase. Learn more about the amazing Solaire infrared grills at besthotgrill.com. That's besthotgrill.com. And I'm here to tell you, man, that was practically the only thing I put on my personal Facebook page for a long time, was all the stuff I was grilling on my Solaire infrared grill. It's just an amazing addition to your backyard or your deck. It is a great investment. It is solid. It's never going to break down. The thing works like a charm. The only thing you have to make sure that you're doing is using it often enough, right? And that's part of the thing, is that you know it's out there, and it's so easy to use. It's really super easy to use. There's no fuss. You get it going. It gets hot almost immediately. You get your grilling done, and the cleanup is quick and easy as well. You just make sure you get the cover for it. They sell that as well, and that thing will be, looking sharp, as long as you own it. So it is an amazing grill. You'll never need another grill after this. Solaire infrared grills, besthotgrill.com. Best grill I've ever owned. Most fun grill I've ever owned. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I like to do is, when I have people over and I'm going to be doing some grilling, is take them out there, because most of them have never seen an infrared grill. And it's, this gleaming, silver-looking, stainless steel thing. It looks clean. It's amazing, and the food off of it, man, it's like you're getting it from one of the best, steak restaurants or salmon restaurants, or chicken. You can cook anything on this thing. So yeah, I've had it for a long time, to the point where I might have even started to tire out some of my friends talking about my Solaire infrared grill from besthotgrills.com. I get a chance to do that here instead of tiring some of my friends out. So now everybody gets the chance to hear it. And joining me right now to discuss a couple of stories that we haven't had a chance to mention yet is our friend Josh Kraushaar, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider, at Josh Kraushaar on Twitter and X. And Josh, you got two stories up today at Jewish Insider, a couple different topics here, but I think both are important. The first one is that I want to discuss with you is a plan, I guess, by the Israeli government, the Netanyahu cabinet, to arm a clan in Gaza that's opposed to Hamas. Tell us a little bit about this, because it sounds to me like the way that Jewish Insider frames it is the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of thing, which is, always a little tricky, but it almost sounds like I've seen this movie before, too.
Yeah, look, the larger context is that there's a lot of sentiment in Israel, and Hugh and I, we've talked about sort of the daily updates on the ground. And look, the Israeli military is, operationally making some achievements, but the challenge is Hamas is still in power, however degraded it is. And there is a sentiment, widespread right now in the Israeli public society, that they would like to prioritize the hostages being released as opposed to, outright winning the war, so to speak, in Gaza. So there's sort of a stalemate, and Netanyahu is certainly going ahead with the operation, but there's a real challenge on trying to figure out who's going to govern Gaza if without Hamas. What is the plan going forward? Netanyahu, it's politically very touchy, and there's a lot of sensitivities around that issue within his coalition. And the latest development is that the prime minister has said, look, he's working with this militia that's opposed to Hamas, that could perhaps counter Hamas, but is also affiliated with the ISIS equivalent of Gaza. And a lot of folks, even on the sort of center right in Israeli politics, are saying this is a really bad idea, that it may in the short term sound like a good idea to come up with some militia to take over in the short term that could contain Hamas. But the U.S. has some experience in the 70s and 80s dealing with short-term partners that end up causing a lot of problems down the road.
Right.
And a whole lot of security officials. You see the reporting in Lahav's story, Lahav Harkov, our Israeli reporter's coverage this afternoon. But there's a lot of warnings that this could actually backfire if they ever went ahead with this.
Well, and look, I mean, I get the idea, right? Because you do have to peel the people away from Hamas, or you have to peel Hamas off of the people, I think is a better way of putting this. And there probably aren't a lot of Thomas Jeffersons and George Washingtons in Gaza at the moment either. So it does make some sense, though, to fall back on sort of the clan structure in in Arabic society to find an ally or at least a partner. And I believe that the Al-Shabaabs are providing some of the security now for the new aid program that Israel has rolled out in Gaza in places where they've been able to wrest control away from Hamas. And I think the idea here is to expand that sense of liberation from Hamas. But, you know, it is a tricky situation. I just don't know that there's a whole lot of other options here for Israel other than outright occupation. And I don't think that the Israeli people are really all that interested in an outright occupation of Gaza again. Long term, I mean.
Right. There are. I mean, you're right. There are no obvious options. One option is a degraded, you know, do kind of maintain the pre-October 7th posture, let a very degraded Hamas, you know, maybe keep them in charge and kind of mow the lawn, as the Israelis did for a while before October 7th. That's sort of, there's a consensus that that's not sustainable. That Hamas needs to be ousted from power. You know, the one plan that a lot of that the Biden administration was certainly promoting. I think Witkoff has probably been talking to the Israelis about it. The Gulf state allies have been behind kind of an outline that would, you know, essentially bring the Palestinian Authority back in charge with the support of some of the Gulf state allies. That is got some support from the U.S. Both the Biden and Trump administrations, I think, have floated that at various times. But it's a little sensitive, certainly with this current government. The notion of the Palestinian Authority being in charge is not necessarily seen as a whole lot better, and there's a lot of security questions along those lines. And then you mentioned the other option, which is, you know, just permanent occupation or a long-term occupation. That's not really sustainable in Israel either, and I think it would drain the military. And really, you're already seeing the strain that the war in Gaza has put on the reservists and the IDF.
Well, yes. I mean, and this is what happens in any long-term protracted military conflict, is it's going to put a lot of strain on your ability to provide men at arms, right? Men and women at arms in the IDF. And I mean, the other option that's been floated around, and I mean, I think that this is mostly just cheap talk, but which is to have the Americans take over the mandate in Gaza and somehow peel Hamas away. But that's not going to fly in the United States either. You mentioned the Saudis.
I don't think that means
help. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't fly politically. I mean, think about the movement in terms of a lot of Trump allies want to get out of the Middle East in a way that's a little bit different from the traditional foreign policy views of the Republican Party. The notion that we'd be occupying, I mean, Gaza Alago aside, or what, Mara Gaza aside. I don't.
Yeah, Mara Gaza or Gaza Lago. I heard it both ways. Mara Gaza or Gaza Lago.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, Trump is the one that's floated that, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of political sense. And it doesn't make sense from a security standpoint in a lot of experts' views. So, you know, the biggest, most viable option has been sort of the Palestinian Authority under Abbas with some of the Gulf state allies having some kind of arrangement. That's imperfect as well for the reasons that we were talking about. But that's, I think, where the U.S. has sort of tried to push the conversation, and the Netanyahu government has been resisting that talk. They prefer, looks like this strategy of empowering these individual militias, which I think there's a lot of skepticism about that plan in Israel right now.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that the Netanyahu government is. I mean, the Saudis wanted to go to the West Bank to meet with the PA, and Netanyahu's government put the kibosh on that. We got about. Can we keep you over for another segment, Josh? Because I want to talk a little bit more about this and one other story.
Sure, absolutely. Really quickly, though, one of the big reasons, I mean, Israeli politics play a big role in a lot of these decision-making processes. And look, even if Netanyahu wanted to do some of these options, some of his coalition partners on the right would blow up the government, would force early elections. So that's limited in Netanyahu's actions. He's certainly playing politics, but that's the necessity to stay in power for Netanyahu.
I did want to get to this other story that you have up at Jewish Insider today, which is that Jews at Harvard are still worried about anti-Semitism and Trump's response to it. And I mean, part of this is, I mean, Trump launched another volley, I believe it was today or late yesterday, saying that he's going to use other authorities to block Harvard from having access to foreign students. You know, there's 160 students from Israel right now at Harvard. And I think that this presents a pretty nuanced picture of, you know, the blessings and curses, if you will, of having Harvard on the defensive in this issue. What's your overall take on this?
Yeah, look, number one, we know anti-Semitism is become a major problem at Harvard and other top like elite institutions like Columbia, and something involving government pressure. I think a lot of Jewish students, a lot of Jewish leaders were supportive of a little bit more of a stick approach rather than a carrot approach, because the university leadership was not really as responsive as they could have been in dealing with the depth of the problems that a lot of these universities face. On the other hand, the weapon that Trump has used, threats and going through with threats and imposing regulations, restrictions on enrolling foreign students, cutting off funding for medical and scientific aid and research. Those are areas that affect Israelis. Israelis now can't enroll at Harvard.
Right.
A lot of their Jewish students and researchers in the sciences that are, trying to discover the cure for cancer and a lot of more anodyne things that all of a sudden are being punished for the sins of people in the humanities departments. So the concern, and this is, I think, pretty widespread in the Harvard Jewish community and writ large, is that the punishment doesn't necessarily deal with the crime. Hopefully, maybe with this kind of machete approach, maybe anti-Semitism will go down. Maybe they did get the message. Maybe these threats will have an impact. But it also is causing a lot of collateral damage, and there are probably a lot of ways, short of banning all foreign students, short of basically cutting off all this scientific research money and grants, that probably could have gotten to the same result without such a heavy-handed approach. So there is, I think I've said the proof will be in the pudding. I think there will be some relief if next year, even with a lot of the costs that have come to Harvard, if anti-Semitism is down, if kind of the radical extremism that we've seen on campus goes away, I think you will see some people celebrating. But the cost is very significant, and I think there's a lot of skepticism too that look, we just at the graduation at Harvard, there were some pretty anti-Israel, anti-Semitic type addresses for the graduation. So even with all these tough measures, it's not necessarily making anti-Semitism go away.
Well, Josh Kroshauer, thank you so much. I really did want to get that story, and it's a great story at Jewish Insider, jewishinsider.com. Go check that out. He's on Twitter, at Josh Kroshauer, on X Twitter, coming to you from day one of the Elon Musk-Donald Trump war right here on Salem News Channel and Salem Radio from the ReliefFactor.com studios here in Central Texas. And look, we've been talking a little bit about, quite a bit actually, about the little battle that's opened up between former besties, Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It's sort of making look the Johnny Depp Amber Heard split up look rational and amicable today. It's one bomb throwing after another on X and on Truth Social. So I thought maybe we should start this hour by trying to focus our attention on some place where comity and consensus and agreement are in lots of are just in abundance. And of course, I mean the Supreme Court. And you might think I'm joking, but today we had actually 5 decisions dropped today, all of which were unanimous. And now that is not necessarily unusual on June the 5th. This is sort of the beginning of decision season now at the Supreme Court. Of course, we've seen some decisions come down during the term, but of course, most of these line up in June. And if you're going to go through your decisions and publish your decisions, the ones that are probably going to get published first are the ones where there's not quite as much dissent and debate on the issues. But I'm not sure I've seen 5 unanimous decisions drop at a time on the same day. And some of these are actually pretty substantive declarations of what we would normally consider to be conservative values. Now, of course, as conservatives, we would argue that these are actually constitutional values, and it really isn't conservative necessarily to come down on the side of the Constitution. But 9-0 is pretty interesting, and 3 of these cases are supremely interesting, and each of these cases is authored, the controlling opinion is authored by one of the liberal justices in the Supreme Court. We're talking about 3, right? Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And I want to start with the one that Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote today, because it's very interesting. This is a case out of Ohio This is a procedural ruling. This is not a ruling on the merits of the case. This is a procedural ruling. And a woman named Marlene Ames brought a lawsuit against the Ohio Department of Youth Services, and she was employed at this state agency, but she was passed over for a promotion and then demoted, and in both cases she claims that it was her sexual orientation that was at issue. Marlene Ames is not lesbian, she's heterosexual. She was passed over for promotion to promote a lesbian ahead of her, and then got demoted and had a gay man take her spot. And so in both of these cases, she claims discrimination. Now, the merits of this have yet to be fully adjudicated. But what the initial court ruled was they dismissed the case because she didn't present enough evidence to overcome a higher evidentiary requirement for what's called majority complainants, which means, in the case of sexual orientation, heterosexuals. And the court was arguing, the district court argued, and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed that in order to bring a discrimination lawsuit as a majority complainant, and again, in this case, it's heterosexuality, you have to have more evidence than other plaintiffs would if they were claiming discrimination on the basis of their sexual orientation because they were gay or they were lesbian or bisexual or transgender. The Supreme Court today ruled 9-0 with Ketanji Brown Jackson writing the controlling opinion that that's absolute nonsense and that there is absolutely nothing in Title VII or in federal law or even in the judicial precedents that justifies the idea that one plaintiff has to have a higher threshold of evidentiary authority than a similarly situated plaintiff in a different case. And this is how NBC News reported it, and I think it's a little cooked here, but they do get to the heart of it. The unanimous ruling could make it easier in some parts of the country for people belonging to majority groups to bring such reverse discrimination, and it's in scare quotes here with NBC News, claims. It overturns precedent in some lower courts that say someone from a majority group has to meet a higher bar than somebody from a minority group for a case to move forward. Yes. And the reason why is because there's really no such thing as reverse discrimination. Discrimination is just discrimination. This is something that the Supreme Court has been trying to get across now for 20 years, is that the only way that you can stop discriminating is simply to stop discriminating. You can't discriminate in order to pay back certain groups for earlier discrimination. You just have to end discrimination. So there's really no such thing as reverse discrimination. If you are discriminating against somebody on the basis of their sexual orientation, no matter what that orientation is, it violates Title VII, and it's illegal, and you can be held liable for that. And this is what Ketanji Brown Jackson had to say. I won't read the whole thing here. It's interesting in that Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote it, and it's interesting in the fact that it was 9-0 at the court. As a textual matter, Title VII's disparate treatment provisions draws no distinctions between majority group plaintiffs and minority group plaintiffs. Rather, the provision makes it unlawful, quote, to fail or refuse to hire or to discharge any individual or otherwise to discriminate against any individual with respect to his compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of such individual's race, color, sex, or national origin. And then, of course, previous precedent holds that sexual orientation is part of discrimination on sex. And that's the reason why this still qualifies under Title VII, even though she didn't, Justice Jackson didn't actually address sexual orientation in this. Now, Judge Clarence Thomas wrote a lengthy concurrence on this, mostly to point out the fact that the court itself is the one that's responsible for the confusion on this. There was a case called McDonnell Douglas Corp. Versus Green in 1973. This goes back 52 years, in which the court hinted that that there might be a necessity of having different evidentiary thresholds depending on the background circumstances of a case. But it wasn't meant, as Thomas argues, it wasn't meant to be a rule. It was just meant to explain how courts might go through and judge some of these matters. He is actually arguing this, that he's hoping a case comes to where they can just throw out McDonnell Douglas precedent, period, and get it out of there. But this is an important step, I think, in moving away from the victim group mentality and moving towards a fair and broad and universal application of civil rights law. If we're going to have these laws, if we're going to tell employers that, or schools for that matter, that you can't discriminate solely on the basis of race, national origin, sex, then that applies equally to everyone, or it shouldn't apply at all. And I'm very encouraged on this particular ruling that it was 9-0, and that one of the liberal wing actually wrote an outstanding concurring opinion. I would highly recommend that you read it. Joining me now is my good friend and VIP Gold Chat partner on Wednesday afternoons, Cam Edwards, managing editor of BearingArms.com, who is coming to us to talk about another unanimous Supreme Court case that was decided today, Smith & Wesson versus Mexico. And Cam, welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, thanks very much, Ed. I appreciate it.
So I think the most interesting part of this is that I believe it was Elena Kagan that wrote the controlling opinion for Smith & Wesson versus Mexico. 9-0 decision telling Mexico to go pound sand. I love that decision as much as I love the one with Ames versus Ohio.
Yeah, this is big. And I confess, the 9-0 decision surprised me. I expected that Mexico was kind of come out on the losing side of this issue, but I figured it would be 7-2, maybe 6-3. I did not expect to see a unanimous court tell Mexico to go pound sand. And yeah, this was a really strong opinion by Elena Kagan. Now, this was not a Second Amendment case, right? This was a case dealing with the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, and whether or not Mexico had shown that the U.S. gun makers were the proximate cause of cartel violence south of the border. And the Supreme Court unanimously agreed that no, they did not. One of the interesting things, though, in that opinion authored by Kagan, Ed, is that there was an acknowledgement by the Supreme Court that AR-15s are the most popular rifle in the country. That came from Elena Kagan, right? So that's pretty important. The Supreme Court earlier this week turned away a case challenging Maryland's ban on so-called assault weapons, but Brett Kavanaugh hinted that they might take up a case in the next term or two. Here you have the court's acknowledgement that, yes, we are talking about now bans on the most popular rifle in the country, guns that are in common use and are owned by a lot of U.S. citizens for lawful purposes.
You know, it can't be a coincidence. It can't just simply be an aside here. I mean, Elena Kagan's a smart person. She understands what an admission about that means. I mean, this gets back to the earlier decision, and I'm sorry, I can't recall exactly which one it was, but where it was argued that any weapons that are in common use in the United States would not really be subject to a ban because it's commonality. And the AR-15 is the model that the left and the gun control groups obsess over. They have to be, I mean, I know that this isn't really a Second Amendment case, but the Second Amendment implications for Smith & Wesson v. Mexico, I mean, that really does have to be worrying some of these gun control groups pushing these bans.
I think so. And Jonathan Lowy, formerly of the Brady campaign, was one of the architects of this lawsuit. He's now got a group called Global Action Against Gun Violence, and he was working with the Mexican government in this lawsuit. So, yeah, I think you're right, because there are some Second Amendment implications here, right? First of all, Mexico is trying to bankrupt these gun companies. This was a $10 billion lawsuit. So that automatically goes off the table, right? But the court also made it clear that you cannot blame gun makers for the third-party actions of criminals. You can't say that, well, gun makers should have known that because some guns end up being used in crime, that they then have to go above and beyond the law, right, in setting their own internal controls, whether it is, stop making AR-15s, whether it is that we're not going to, sell to any distributor that will then turn around and sell to a retailer that will allow adults under the age of 21 to purchase these firearms. Those were the types of controls that Mexico wanted to see these companies be forced to put in place. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's absolutely outrageous. Well, if that applies to violence committed by Mexican drug cartel members, then that would apply to violence committed by gang members here in the United States, by twisted individuals who are intent on massacring as many innocent people as possible. Yeah, this is a big blow to the gun control groups' decades-long agenda of trying to bankrupt the industry through lawsuits.
Well, and I think that this points out the value of the campaign to pass the PLCAA in the first place, right? I mean, this is not they're not deciding a constitutional issue, not really. They're deciding that whether the law that got passed, the PLCAA, covers the set of circumstances that you have here, and it turns out it's very robust. It does cover that, and it does prevent people from trying to bankrupt the manufacturers of firearms, to which Americans actually have a right to access, with the exception in some limited circumstances, such as being a felon and that sort of thing. This actually shows how effective the PLCAA is and how difficult it is for anybody to get around it.
Well, at least it shows how effective it should be, right?
Yes.
And, we have seen states around the country try to do end runs around the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. They've tried to pass public nuisance laws that would allow for lawsuits based on, advertising from gun companies, not necessarily the manufacturing. I think those challenges are going to face a more difficult time in court now as a result of today's decision. So this does have implications not only for Smith & Wesson, but it's got implications for a number of these lawsuits that have been filed against U.S. gun makers, for actions that have been undertaken here on U.S. soil by violent criminals. And that's a very good thing, because you're right. This was passed on a bipartisan basis in 2005 for the precise reason of stopping these types of junk lawsuits. So the gun control groups have gotten pretty creative over the past couple of decades, but I think the Supreme Court has foreclosed a lot of the avenues that they've used to try to do an end run around the PLCAA.
So now that you've read this, do you have a little bit better feeling about the refusal to take up Snope? You and I were talking about that yesterday. I mean, we didn't know that this decision was going to drop today. And I said I'm a little unhappy about this because it looks like they're never going to take up the issue of that Snope raises about assault weapons bans. But after reading this, I'm thinking maybe the time is going to be ripe and we're going to see something along those lines pretty soon.
I got to tell you, I'm so frustrated because to me, this seems like this would have been the perfect opportunity, right? I mean, if the court has now said, yes, we're talking about the most commonly owned rifle in the country, why wouldn't the court take up this case dealing with a ban on the most popular rifles in the country? I still don't understand the rationale for kicking this can down the road another term or two, as Brett Kavanaugh suggested. My concern is that despite this unanimous decision today, we still don't necessarily have 5 justices that would agree to overturn that ban.
Yep.
And, again, we don't know this to be the case yet. I mean, there could be some horse trading going on. Listen, if we, kick this can down the road a couple of terms, then maybe we'll take this other case instead. We don't know. But my opinion is sooner rather than later, the court needs to weigh in on these gun bans, because until they do, we're going to see more blue states pass these gun bans. Rhode Island's House of Representatives passing a bill today. That bill moves over to the Senate now. So, they're emboldened by the Supreme Court's inaction, and the Supreme Court really does need to act with haste.
Cam Edwards, BearingArms.com. Go to BearingArms.com. Look at Cam, the Cam and Company podcast. I want to talk again about Hugh's annual Angel Tree Camp Drive. Thanks to men and women just like you, so far this month we've blessed over 190 children with a mom or dad in prison with a trip to Angel Tree Camp for an entire week. This has the potential to literally transform these kids' lives and break the cycle of crime in their family. You could be the next person who sponsors our next deserving boy or girl who will be enjoying a week of fresh air, fun, and gospel-centered activities at an Angel Tree Camp near their home. We have a banner up at HughHewitt.com. You can just click on it to make a secure online donation. Steve Collins is a senior director of Angel Tree Camping, and he says that when you make a gift to an Angel Tree kid, you're helping shape the future of America.
When you invest in the life of a child and you give them an opportunity to experience the reality of who God is and what his love does for their lives, and you pour that investment into that child's life, you're not just reaping benefits this year, but you're changing the course of their life. You've got kids that are growing up and establishing their own families and contributing to society, and you're shaping the future of our nation. And there's no better place to invest your money.
I want to invite you to join Hugh's many other listeners in transforming young lives. Your gift of $200 or whatever you can give will help make it possible to send a kid to camp for an entire week. So please just go to HughHewitt.com and click on the Make a Difference in the Lives of Prisoners' Children banner. Or you can phone in your most generous gift in any amount by calling it at 888-206-2764. That's 888-206-2764. And thank you for helping us send these wonderful children to an Angel Tree Camp this summer. You'll be making a difference in a child's life for eternity. Now, I'd also like to talk a little bit about gold and silver. There are many good reasons to buy gold and silver: bank failures, digital currency volatility. AmFed Coin and Bullion is Hugh's choice for precious metals. If you ask AmFed owner Nick Grovich to simplify the case for precious metals, he'll tell you that when President Roosevelt recalled the gold in circulation and paid people with paper money, they received a $20 bill for a $20 gold piece. Today, that $20 bill won't even fill half of your gas tank, but the gold piece is worth over $3,400. So which would you rather own? AmFed Coin and Bullion. Nick's been in this industry for 44 years, and he's proud of providing transparency and fair pricing to build trusted relationships. If you're interested in buying or selling, call Nick and his team at AmFed Coin and Bullion, 800-221-7694, AmericanFederal.com, AmericanFederal.com, 800-221-7694. And we've got about a minute left here. I want to talk a little bit about maybe a couple topics that we're going to get to. I want to go back to another Supreme Court decision today that was, I think, just as important as Smith & Wesson v. Mexico, just as important as Ames versus Ohio Department of Youth, and that is a decision involving the tax judgment on Catholic charities in Wisconsin. And this actually is a decision on the merits. So this is actually providing some finality. It was, again, a 9-0 decision based on the First Amendment, and it was written by Sonia Sotomayor. And both Clarence Thomas and Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote some pretty interesting concurrences as well. But I think that Sonia Sotomayor really nailed it in her controlling opinion. We're going to talk a little bit about that after the break. We're also maybe going to get a little bit more into some of the things that happened at the White House today with Donald Trump. A couple of things that he talked about. He talked about his actions in terms of foreign student visas, talking about the new travel ban that he's put in place for 12 different countries. We want to talk a little bit about that, listen to what Donald Trump had to say. So we might come back to that in the next segment as well. And we're also going to talk a little bit more probably by the end of this about the fight that's brewing or has erupted between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. There's so much here that both men could do by working together that you almost have to think that this is going to be a one-day flash in the pan. Donald Trump has talked about canceling space contracts now, and Elon Musk has talked about shutting down the Dragon spacecraft. And going to Mars has been his dream. He wants to go to Mars. He wants to send human beings to Mars. He really can't do that without the U.S. government, and I don't think he can afford to take 3.5 years off on that pursuit either. I think the American public would move on in ways that would be not beneficial to Elon Musk. So I'm hoping that this is just a little phase and we get back to business as usual. The third Supreme Court decision, the other two were more technical, by the way. They are also unanimous. They're also interesting in their own right. But this last one here, I think is a really important decision in terms of the exercise of the First Amendment when it comes to religious faith. And that's Catholic Charities Bureau versus Wisconsin Labor and Industry Review Commission. And again, Sonia Sotomayor wrote the controlling opinion on this 9-0 decision. And what the state of Wisconsin was saying to Catholic Charities was that because their social services are offered to people outside of the Catholic faith, and that the provision of these services didn't include evangelizing specifically for Catholicism, that then they were therefore not actually a religious organization and were not entitled to a religious, the tax exemption that would normally come to religious organizations, religious charitable organizations. And of course, they fought this, and it slogged through the Wisconsin courts, it slogged through the federal court, and it got to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court reversed the previous judgments and said this is ridiculous. This is, on its face, discriminatory against Catholics, because Catholics, and I can attest to this, Catholics are not allowed, really, to condition the reception of charitable actions, right, on the basis of listening to proselytization or evangelization. In fact, the way that Catholic doctrine dictates is that that's actually not licit at all. You're not ever supposed to do that. If you're offering charitable works to your community, it should be open to the entire community, and it should not be conditioned on conversion or the endurance of unwanted evangelization. They let the work speak for itself, and this is not every denomination is like this. A lot of denominations, they have charitable groups that are really focused on just their own parishioners, or are based entirely on evangelization / evangelization. We'll just stick with evangelization. I can say that one today. But to rule that Catholic Charities is not a religious group, first off, is pretty absurd on its face. But also, as Sonia Sotomayor points out, it's also discrimination. It's discriminatory. It's discriminating on the basis of religion. And what she is arguing, this is, I think, a very astute point, is that the state of Wisconsin is arrogating unto itself the right to pick and choose which religious denominations are religious, and which religious doctrines, and this is the most important thing, which religious doctrines are valid and which ones are not. And Sotomayor says that's simply not sustainable. Thomas goes into a little bit more detail, though, I think, and while I think Sotomayor really did a great job in her controlling opinion, the real issue here is that courts and governments have been growing more and more hostile to the idea that the right to religious expression that is explicitly granted in the First Amendment means only that that expression which takes place within the four walls of a church, or 6 walls or 8 walls, whatever it might be, but within the walls of a church, or a synagogue or a temple or whatever, a mosque. And that's simply not the case. The idea is that you are able to live your life of faith in public, in your public business, as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of somebody else. And charitable organizations are structured for this, especially Catholic charitable organizations, but not just Catholics. There's other denominations that structure it the same way, which is that they are trying to get the greatest good out to the greatest number of people, not for the purposes of explicit evangelization, but for the purposes of helping the community, because it is very much a tenet of the faith that is what they're supposed to do. Jewish groups are like this as well. Now, Jewish groups tend to focus more on the Jewish community, but that is part of their faith as well, is to go out and repair the world, tikkun olam. And so to say that you're only going to recognize those denominations which do it in a way that is approved by the state of Wisconsin is absurd. And that is one aspect of this. But the other aspect of this is the governments and the courts have to stop trying to constrain religion to simply showing up to church, because that is not what the First Amendment says. It is not what it guarantees. It guarantees the right of every American to live a life of faith on their own, in public, in all of their public spaces. And that means, and unfortunately we see this in the UK right now, that means if you stop outside an abortion clinic and cross yourself and say a prayer outside of an abortion clinic, as long as you're not trespassing on their property, you should be able to do that. You should be able to tell people, hey, this is, we think this is evil, etc. Right? Now, unfortunately, we're seeing sort of more of the end game in Europe of this idea that faith only belongs within the four walls of the church or the four walls of your home and nowhere else, and you're not allowed to engage in it, because the UK is arresting people who pray outside of abortion clinics, who pray on the street, who even look like they're praying on the street. They are arresting people for tweets that are criticizing the police for, it's not quite the same thing, but it's a thought police that is exactly where this country is going to go unless you have these types of recognition of what the First Amendment actually is and why the First Amendment is so important in terms of religious liberty. Because the First Amendment doesn't just guarantee that you can go to the church down the street or the other one down the other street. It guarantees you can live a life of faith in your entire life, your whole life, which is exactly what religions are there to teach us, which is to give our lives to God. Now that doesn't, and again, this is getting a little bit theological, but if you can't do that in America, then the First Amendment has gone awry, the courts have gone awry, and governments have gone awry. And especially if you've got a government saying, we're only going to recognize your charity if you are extremely narrow about how you apply it, it's even more absurd. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh today.
Relationships may come and go, but disco will never die.
Are you on Musk's side or are you on Trump's side, Dwayne?
I am watching the tennis match here. Look, I was late to the game with Musk anyway. I never bought the fact that he was just all of a sudden a conservative. He had a long history, and I wasn't sure how much of a conversion he was. I'm not necessarily anti-Musk. I think the guy has done a lot of, brilliant, genius business moves. But I'm just, I don't know. I've got to think that both of them are pretty alpha male, and I'm sure they've done a lot of similar type of communications outside of the public eye. But somewhere along the way, somebody's going to reach both of them and realize, this is in neither one of your best interests.
It's a whole thing that I've been thinking for the last 3 hours, Dwayne. Since this thing broke out just as we were going on air, right? So it's like almost like wartime broadcasting, but with no bodies, which is great. I mean, that's the kind of wartime broadcasting I like. But I mean,
while all this was going on, there was reports that a bunch more Ukrainian drones were in the area, and the Bryansk airport, which was supposedly housing a lot of MiG-8s and a Russian aircraft and maybe a munitions depot, just blew up. I mean, there's real war actually going on and stuff happening, but everybody's focused on what's in the Epstein files again. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
How I know that Trump's not in the Epstein files? Because it didn't come out in October of last year. That's how I know that.
If there was even the remote possibility of cherry picking that out and putting that out in the ether a month before the election in either 2016 or 2020 or 24 for that matter,
right?
They would have done so.
That would have already been out. All right. So I just want to see if you are. I'm not aligned. I'm on the sidelines, man. I'm Switzerland on this thing. There are things I like about Bob. Now, really quickly, you're guest hosting tomorrow, but before then, we're going to do the week in review. And I'm sorry to tell you that there's really nothing to talk about at the week in review. Nothing happened this week.
About an hour after we wrap this, in a minute, when we wrap this show, an hour from now, I'm supposed to lay down the next edition of Dwayne's World. I can't even imagine what I'm going to do with that.
There's nothing. There's nothing going on, man. It's a slow news day. just two multi-billionaires going after each other on their respective, social media platforms.
If they don't go from DEFCON 1 back up to 3 or 4 before too long, there may not be anything left tomorrow.
That's true. We might have the day off. Who knows? All right, Dwayne Generalissimo Patterson. He's going to be guest hosting tomorrow. He'll be behind the mic for you guys. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com. It's been a pleasure hosting the show for Hugh Hewitt. I hope you all have a great evening.